camera as well, and take it away.
All right, good morning, or good afternoon, I guess it is, 4 o'clock. Are you guys engineering students? I don't know. I've come here without knowing anything about the event. Like, what do you do? What do you do?
Engineering? I'm an engineering
Are you an engineering student?
Computer science.
What?
Computer science.
Oh, okay. What about you?
VFX programming.
What?
VFX programming.
Oh, okay. I know Mike up there. Ma'am, what are you doing?
I'm with the plant-based 3D.
The what?
Plant-based 3D?
Oh, okay. And what do you do, sir? I'm just trying to get an idea of who you all are.
Economics.
Oh, okay, you're an economist, okay, the dismal science. Yeah, okay. So, all right, that's fine. Mike's asked me here and not really explain fully really what we're doing here, but I guess I'll just ramble on about who I am and what I do. That's me. I'm looking at the CN Tower. I'm a kayaker, obviously. I'm a lawyer as well. So just to give you a brief bit of background, I worked for one of the big downtown firms. Eventually I started a small litigation firm. I was doing stuff to do with drugs and pharmaceuticals. And I dealt a lot with pharmaceutical experts and chemists and stuff like that in this litigation about patents. And eventually I just burnt myself out doing that after about 25 years, and I became a sort of layabout, essentially did nothing really except kind of invest in things. And I got interested in the water. Well, I'd been interested in the water, I think, as a kid, long time ago. I remember, getting in canoes at my grandparents' place or whatever and just sort of loving it. So at some point 20 years ago or something, maybe longer, 30 years ago, I remember acquiring a kind of a rubber boat, like an inflatable thing. I think I got it at Canadian Tire or something. And I could go out on the water, and it just somehow thrilled me to pieces to just be out on the water. I would go out early before my kids were up. They were kind of small then. And I just found there was something magical about just sort of floating around on the water. So I would be out there. And so I'm out in the water around Toronto Island, east, west, whatever, quite a lot. And I guess it sort of formed my view of the way things work. At some point, back around maybe almost 10 years ago now, there was a push which some of you may remember, some of you probably too young to remember, but there was a push to have jets at the Toronto Island Airport, and that involved expanding the runway about 200 meters in either direction so these huge jets could land there. And that struck me as being absolutely an appalling idea, and I decided I would do everything in my power to prevent it from happening. As it happened, I had some skills that were relevant to that because as a lawyer, I'd been a litigator.
Well, the lav mic's right there if you want to use that too, right?
Can people hear me? You can't hear me. Yeah, you can hear me up there? So I'm okay, I think. I got involved in that, and it was all about the water and the harbor and sort of preserving it and not having huge jets spewing stuff around. And the littler runway was sort of okay, I guess, but whatever I thought about that, I didn't want the bigger one. And so also I'd been a lobbyist, so I'd done a lot of lobbying in the federal and provincial levels. So it ended up being that it happened to fit my skill set. I spent about 3 years working on that, and ultimately it was defeated. Not because of me necessarily, but I would say, on the team anyway. And so after that, a whole bunch of people that were in some cases very interesting, smart people, had different kinds of expertise, had gotten together in that effort, had different kinds of expertise, and we decided we'd get together and kind of just be a group that would meet now and then and be interested in the harbor and promoting what we thought was good and essentially opposing what we thought was bad. And for me, it was all about the water. And as it happens, that area of the city has become hugely important over the last few years in a kind of an accelerating way that some of you maybe know about, or some of you don't, but it's at least, I think, an interesting thing. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes and sort of going over roughly what's going on and what my perspective on it is. Let's see. This is how do I advance it again?
Just push the right arrow.
The right arrow. No.
Is it working?
No.
Huh.
some other thing I push, I guess.
Oh, is it selected? Let me see.
Yeah. Oh, I see. We roll.
Well,
We
maybe you
scroll.
can
That's
roll
how we
down.
do
It goes up
Okay.
to down.
So we scroll.
2 fingers.
2 fingers, right? Okay, yeah. Okay, good enough. This is a website. It's got a bunch of stuff on it, sort of events that we hold. We had our annual general meeting the night before last.
Yeah.
Mike honored us with his presence. And we talked about, I gave a kind of a summary overview of what's going on in the waterfront and a sort of a political and legal and sort of zoning way, I guess, which I do every year. So if you're interested in that, it's 12 pages. Somebody can read it. It's on the website. So we're called Waterfront for All. We're kind of an umbrella group of residents associations and other entities involved in the waterfront somehow or other. As I said, I think one of the best ways to see the waterfront and have a sense of it and really sort of understand Toronto's integration with the water is to be in a kayak, because we are actually built around a harbor. We are here because there is a harbor, because it was the base of a portage route up to Lake Simcoe way back before there were white settlers here. So the idea that there's a harbor there, that there's an island that protects it, and there's a shoreline is sort of integral to the entire existence of our city. And when you're out there, despite the skyscrapers and the CN Tower, which have their own kind of beauty, I think you understand it more. You kind of feel like that's really what our city is about. It's sort of like concentric circles that go out from this oval-shaped harbor. That is the center. That is the basis for our city, in my opinion. I do it typically. This is at the foot of Reese Street. It's just at the foot of the CN Tower. It's very close to the Rogers Center. And they store a bunch of boats. I have a bunch of boats there. And we go out, you could go out even when the weather's bad. And so that's been a fantastic thing for me, and I think for some other people, is to store a boat. I don't know if you've ever been there. In the summer, they do some stuff there to make it accessible for people who don't have boats or just trying out the sport. There's a website. It's called Harborfront Canoe and Kayak, actually, is the spot. But there's other spots to launch.
Well, show it on the map where the boats are if you can.
Yeah, I
so
will.
everybody knows
so
we're
here's
there.
our next slide. It's do you have a stick? How do I do? Can I
Yeah,
point
can you
on
move the
here?
mouse cursor?
Huh?
Yeah, just move the mouse cursor like
Oh, mouse cursor, where's that?
there's this. It's a trackpad.
Oh, yeah, trackpad, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you can see my little arrow. There you are,
Yeah, yeah.
So it is right here. That's called the Reese Street Slip. This is the Sky Dome or Rogers Center, whatever you call it. CN Tower is there. Our typical little trip, sort of a default trip, is me and one of my buddies, and we go out the Western Gap around here, in the other way, and back again. That's about a 12K circuit that we enjoy. You can, of course, meander all over the place, and it was in the course of one such meandering trip.
Is that near Peter Street? Near Peter Street Basin?
Not too far.
Yeah.
It's a little, I believe, east of Peter Street.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Reese Street.
Yeah.
East of Spadina, right?
Yeah.
Peter
Okay.
would be on the other side. So.
No,
Anyway,
Peter Street is
that's
also.
where it is.
Yeah.
So, in one of my meanders, we go out to the Humber River, which is out this way, and I encountered Steve Mann, and on several of these trips, there he is in the water, pretty unmistakable, because he's the only guy out there in the water wearing a thing like this on his head. So I guess we got sort of acquainted. There's a big issue at Ontario Place that he can tell you about, or I can, which essentially has to do with the provincial government building a big spa there, which I don't think you like. A lot of people don't like it, but they're
A spa that's disconnected from the lake. At first I thought, hey, that's not a bad idea. In fact, my daughter and I suggested building a spa there in 2011.
Oh, okay.
But it would be a spa that connects you to the lake with water slides going down into the lake.
Into the lake, okay.
And a sauna and
Whereas this is not like that.
hot
yeah.
tub. But this is isolating people from the lake. It's the
Isolated.
exact
So this-
opposite of what we thought should be built there.
Yeah, so that's an issue that we have an offshoot group called Ontario Place for All that's been very active in agitating about that. We'll see what's going to happen. The mayor has made a deal seemingly with the provincial government. She says, okay, we, the city, will not interfere with that, provided you take the Don Valley Parkway and the Gardiner off our hands, so we don't have to pay for it anymore, which works for the city, because the city has terrible fiscal problems, and hopefully that'll contribute to helping them. But the issue about Ontario Place will probably go on. There's other interesting things going on. This is a map from what's called the Marine Use Study being done by Waterfront Toronto. I should go back and just explain what that is. Waterfront Toronto is an interesting thing. It's a three levels of government uniting in an agency, something that doesn't exist elsewhere in Canadian politics that I know. You have three levels of government: municipal, provincial, federal. One of the problems in Toronto, in terms of beautifying the waterfront or trying to achieve anything on the waterfront, was that different parts of it have always been owned by different levels of government or controlled by different levels of government. They were always working at cross purposes, making a mess. There would be railways that were going along it. There were privately owned warehouses and things like that. The province had that bit of land. The feds had the airport. And this bit of land over here, which is the port where the big ships are. The city had the park. So you had three levels of government. And the waterfront was, when I was a kid, I grew up in Toronto, you basically wouldn't go there. You might go over the island once a year, but you would never go there just to hang around, because it was all barbed wire fences and piles of salt and parking lots and things like that. And it was also disgusting. The water was horrible. So people would say, well, why can't we fix up the waterfront? Other places fix it, but why can't we do it? There was a guy called Robert Fung, who was sort of a Liberal Party operative back in the 90s under Chrétien. And he wrote a report called the Fung Report. And in that report, he said, what we need to do is create an agency which represents all three levels of government. There will be people on the board from all three levels of government. That means that they'll be able to work together and figure out a way to make things happen on the waterfront. In other words, everybody's kind of working in one direction as opposed to sort of just squabbling and fighting in different directions. And that fundamental vision, which was maybe 25 years ago, has fundamentally changed our waterfront. It's made it possible to revitalize it and for many exciting things to happen. This is a diagram from a meeting. This is actually me, I think, in the meeting. The meeting was about a particular issue, which was what's called marine transportation. In other words, should there be more water taxis? Should there be something called sea buses? The dotted lines show possible routes where you might want to go from, say, over the east end of the harbor over to the west end, and then along that dotted line, there might be a ferry that would go from over here, over there, and this kind of stuff. In other words, it would change from the model that we're all used to, where you just have one ferry dock on the city side that goes to three places on the island. It's been like that for 100 years. It might be necessary to change it as the western part, the eastern part, what's called the Portlands, becomes developed, which is now going to start to happen. So anyway, it's just one such meeting about these things. I tend to go to these meetings and get interested, and they tend to ask me, which is nice, I guess. This is one of the interesting things on our waterfront. Let me just explain where this is. So this over here, first of all, this bit of green right up here, this is the Don River. Don River comes into something called the Keating Channel, which is here. It's just a big, nasty stretch, concrete walls. It's got horrible crap, comes down the river, goes in there. There's a possibility of flooding. The Don River periodically floods, and it can flood the entire area of the Portlands down here, and also actually a lot of the downtown area if you had a big rainfall. If you have a sort of a Hurricane Hazel event, there was Hurricane Hazel in 1954, 56, I'm forgetting the exact year. when the Humber River filled up with water, the Don River filled up with water, any neighborhood that's below the floodplain gets washed out into the lake, people die. That resulted in a rule, which is good, that you can't build in our ravines. That's freed up our ravine system for a fabulous system of ravines, bike paths, whatever, that I'm sure you all have been to, and it's one of the great things about our city. With respect to the Don River, it was straightened out in the 19th century and given this sort of right-hand turn. And I'm sure Steve would be able to give us a little lecture about why water doesn't like flowing in a 90 degrees, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't like to go like this and then go like this. That's not its natural thing. So you get a lot of water coming down the river. What's going to happen is it's going to burst out of that corner, and it's going to go all over here and flood everything. So that's why that part of the city has tended to be just low industrial stuff, piles of salt, 1-2-story kind of light industrial stuff, kind of derelict. You go down there. I always kind of loved it, actually, just because it is kind of forgotten and kind of this place that, you know, it seems like people just don't go to, but it is wasted space. It's quite close to downtown. So what is happening, as you may know, is that maybe this slide's slightly better. Waterfront Toronto has, which is the 3 government agency, has embarked on a very ambitious plan to create an island. So this is the Keating Channel, which I mentioned before, along the top here, just a long straightaway, very icky right now, old rusting boats in there and stuff. And the plan is, and we are very close to succeeding to finishing this now, it's been about 5 or 6 years of construction, is to build a second river mouth here. Got a bit of a wind in it for aesthetic reasons, really. So that and also this is a spillway, it's called the Don Greenway, so that in a flood, the water would come down here and it would come out through the spillway into what's called the ship channel down here. So in a catastrophic flood, the water would not flood the entire Portlands, but instead would go out through these various exits. So this bit here, the lower and second mouth of the river is artificial. It will open in the very near future, actually. I was told actually a few weeks ago that it would open in January, and I was asked if I want to lead a group of kayakers around it, and I said, oh, yep, absolutely I do. But I've been told that it's not quite going to work that way, so I don't know what's going to happen. But there are the way they work this, and some of you are engineers, maybe you already know all about it, but if you want to create a new waterway like that, what you do, as I understand, is you have a plug at one end, or a dam, and a dam at the other. You excavate what's in between. You create a river, you put down whatever kind of cladding, plants, and so on you want, and then what you do is you gradually fill it up once it's complete. So they're gradually going to start filling it up, as I understand it, in the next few weeks, and they're going to take away what's called the west plug, which is this one here. This is Cherry Street. The new bridge at Cherry Street will open. This bridge here, if you've been down here, it's yellow. You might have been along here, and it's been open since I think October of 2022. Kind of neat. It's yellow, very very pretty. These are also elegant, but you can't go over them yet. But I understand you will be able to by the end of the year, which is, when's that? 2 weeks. So the Cherry Street will have been essentially redirected. And I had just found out, I think it was yesterday, that this, what's called the North Plug, won't come out right away. I had been informed that it would be in the next few weeks. Apparently it'll be a little bit later. So my kayak circumnavigation of Villiers Island is going to be delayed a little while. Maybe the weather will be a little better by the time we have it. So I'm excited about that. That'll be good. Parkland, densification in the gray area. There's been discussions about increasing the densification about 30% from the original plan in 2017, because it seems the transit and the services can support it. So it's all good. And it's an example of what the 3 levels of government can accomplish when they work together. I'm trying to get the...
What about this? What's the shoreline like? Is it nice, easy access
so the
to
shoreline
swimmers?
in here is park, as you can see. There's a lot of plantings and so on. This is something
Is it a
called-
nice gently sloped
Yeah,
shore for
so-
easy swim access?
I think so. I
Yeah.
believe so.
Like a
I think
nice
you will be
beach.
able to, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we need is more beaches.
Yeah, and this is called Canoe Cove here. There is actually a beach area here. And there's islands. You can see the little islands. The idea is you'd be able to canoe in here, or kayak presumably,
Or paddleboard.
or paddleboard in here, yeah. So, it'll be kind of neat. Now, the build out of the buildings here, the park actually comes first. The way Waterfront Toronto's done its various renovations is it's tended to do the parkland first so that people can see that something positive is happening. The buildings come later. The buildings in this case will not be built, as I understand it, full build out on Villiers Island will not happen probably till the 2040s. So we're talking a sort of a generation really. And then ultimately, because the whole Portlands won't be flooding as it was, this whole area down here will build out over decades to come. But it'll become kind of the new center of the city, I believe, or at least a very important integral part of it. Because when you think about our downtown core, I worked at the Commerce Court for about 20 years, and you know, down here, those buildings were built in 1970. They're now 50 years, more than 50 years old. This is going to be beautiful new part of the city, more sort of mixed residential office buildings and so on, integrated with parks. It'll seem, I think the older part of the city, King and Bay and so on, will seem pretty old-fashioned once this stuff is up. So it'll change our city really quite dramatically. It's been very exciting to be on the water and just seeing that bit happen. Here's another map from some other meeting. I think I'm in one of these little Zoom boxes down below where basically we're talking about what you'll do on the parks and the access points to the water and being able to walk around and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of cool. Well, that's another way to get out on the water is to take a canoe, take a big canoe. That's quite popular with tourist groups who tend to go off. They come from Spain or something, I don't know, and they go out and it's a big thrill for people. I used to conduct tours. I still do sometimes, and it's really kind of neat. People come from wherever they have come from, wherever, Taiwan, don't know, and they're a little bit struck. You know, nobody ever told them that Toronto was breathtakingly beautiful. But it is. If you go through the island canals, they're stunning. You're out in a canoe, you're going around, you go, this is amazing. We have an extraordinary city here and a great resource here that we should appreciate. I grew up not understanding it because my instinct as a person growing up in Toronto was you don't go to the waterfront because it's shit. You might get beaten up. There's nothing there but warehouses and railroads and stuff like that. So changing the thinking about our waterfront has taken a long time, but it's in fact one of the great jewels. There's a thing at Harbourfront Canoe and Kayak, which is basically called social paddle. It means you've never paddled before, fine, you come out, we give you a paddle, we all go out in a big group, and there's no arduous paddling or anything, you just sort of have a good time. That's a picture of that. You can go out in winter, but you have to know what you're doing a little bit. You wear a dry suit with zippers and things, and it's kind of cool to go out there at that time. It's sort of like cross-country ski. You can do it. You just have to have the equipment. You have to have a little bit of know-how. You don't want to be, there's less room for error. You don't want to be making a mistake in the middle of winter and ending up in the water. But once you've acquired the basic skills, you're able to do it. I think I'm the third person there, and there we are at the racks. One of the things that's happening that's interesting about is that we have an airport, of course, and many of you have probably been there. We have the Toronto Island Airport. It's right here. And you've, I'm sure, all seen the ads for, there's the Raccoon and Porter flights to places, and I take Porter. I love to go on the flights to New York or wherever it is. Here's an interesting thing that's happening that I think not a lot of people know about, which is that we have to decide as a city in the next probably about a year and a half whether to continue with the island airport or not. Why? Because really two things are happening, two timelines are kind of converging. One is that there's a regulatory requirement, which is federal, that they need to build extensions essentially at the end of the runway, what are called runway end safety areas. And that is gonna cost a lot of money. The estimate that they gave, the island airport is in perpetual financial trouble. It tried to sell itself a couple of years ago to get a partner willing to invest money, couldn't do it. But in that process, they were asked, various questions, and one of the obvious questions is, how much is this RISA thing gonna cost? And the answer they gave was, we estimated it between $50 and $130 million. So that's quite a bit of money. I believe that probably that estimate is too low. So it's quite a bit of money. It's a competitive market. Apparently the costs of operating out of the island airport are about 3 times what they are at Pearson. So Porter is starting to leave. It's now operating out of Pearson a lot. And they can run jets there, as they can't do downtown. So there's a bunch of reasons why the island airport may be coming to the end of its useful life. This gentleman as an economist can tell us whether that makes sense or not. But so here's my view on it is that the city is a party. There's a thing called the tripartite agreement, essentially the lease on the land. It's 206 acres. The city is owner of part of it, and the city therefore gets to have input with the federal government in whether we continue with it or not. Everybody will have different opinions. People will say it's great. You can fly a long way. I love to go down to the waterfront and not go to Pearson if I'm flying to New York or Halifax, whatever. But the question is, how many people are using it? So what I've said to the city in a long paper that is cited on the website is, this is the time to do a very serious study of the economics of whether it makes sense. Is there an alternative better use for the 206 acres or not? And in that, they should look at the full panoply of issues. So that means not only the economic issues, are we really duplicating infrastructure that's already available? We have the Up Express, people can get up to the airport. This is an airport that is not reachable by a 400 series highway. It can never grow very much. Most cities in the world don't have a downtown airport. Why is that? Well, I think it's partly for economic reasons. So these are complicated questions. People have different opinions. But I wrote quite a long paper, which I got into the city bureaucrats actually in October, because it looked as though the bureaucrats were going to write to city council and say, well, here's what we should look at. Here's the scope of the issues. And they were going to do that for the executive committee meeting on December 5th. So I got my paper to them about, sometime in late October, saying, well, here's a bunch of issues that I think you should look at. You need to study not only the economic impact, but the health impacts, the traffic impacts, the transportation efficiency impacts, and all of that stuff. And here's what we know, because they did extensive studies 10 years ago at the time of the Jets debate, and they identified many problems. So the question arises, are the problems still there? Are they better? If they solve, what about the noise? The noise is a very serious problem for the people who live near there. Can we fix it? Does it matter? And so on. So there's a kind of a multi-department team within the city government that I know is preparing this report, which will define what it is we need to study. And it's unclear when that report will go before Executive Committee of Council. There is an Executive Committee meeting at the end of January. I think it's January 30th. I expect they'll miss that one. And it'll be the next one, which I think is either end of February or sometime March, I'm not sure. But at some point, we're going to be off to the races with this as an issue. It's going to be in the papers. It's going to be a bit of a big deal with people weighing in on both sides. I guess I'm being given the hook. So that's everybody waving bye-bye. These are some friends of mine last January. So thanks very much for your attention. And if you have a question, I'm happy to answer. Just come up to me afterwards.
Excellent talk. Really, really good. I think you touched on a lot of really important issues.
Okay.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So next up, Mike Shorman. Really fascinating